everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Tim and Tim Talk. Tim, you're here. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. Tim, it's been award show season lately, and there's been a lot of hubbub about the award shows. The Oscars just happened. You watched it.
Woohoo!
I am a bad production person and missed the Oscars. What did I miss?
Well, Tim, the reason I watch it is because I secretly, desire to be on that stage someday with the trophy, making best accolades for director or maybe actor, Tim. How is my acting?
Tim and Tim Talk did not get nominated this year. We got snubbed. I don't know how we lost that one, but
Where's the recount? Can we trigger the recount? Did ballots get stuff going? There's something to this, Tim.
I think it was hanging chads.
Yeah, we definitely did. But this Oscars, though, Tim, I think the way to summarize what happened with this Oscars is just breaking the rules. This Oscar season, they broke tons of rules. So much so, Tim, that, my professors, if I broke one of these rules back in the day when I was in college, I would have gotten a failing grade.
Aren't these like film professionals? What are they doing here, Tim?
Right, that's exactly. What are they doing? And what am I talking about? So let's talk about this. Here's a shot right here that you can see next to me. And if you notice how low they are, well, let's take that back a step, actually, Tim. And so let's talk about what was proper framing. Proper framing is like how you and I are right now, right? We just have a little bit of headroom above us, and we're centered into the camera, right? But what are the Oscars doing? They're down here. They're down. They're like this. Join me. Would you join? Yeah, like that. That doesn't feel as comfortable.
I mean,
does it?
It is comfortable. I think I'll stay like that.
Oh, okay. You have a better chair than me. You have higher production value over there, I think.
Never.
But it's basically breaking the rules of the thirds, right?
So why are they doing that, Tim? They must have a reason, right? This is the Oscars. It's not an accident. What happened?
That would be amazing if it was an accident, right? They just randomly, like a camera guy, just totally, chucked the rule book out and said, nah, I'm a freelancer. I'm going to shoot it my way. You're right, Tim. They broke the rules, and you know why they broke the rules. And you and I should get credit for this because another famous Tim influenced it.
Tim, not one of us? One of us?
Not one of us, but this Tim has an open invitation to join us basically at any time to the show. It's Mr. Tim Cook from Apple, the CEO of Apple. But really, this actually goes back even before Tim Cook to Steve Jobs. Now, if you take a look at here, you can see an Apple keynote. And Tim, do you notice the similarities?
That framing, right? The framing with the talent in the corner, and we're like looking up at the backdrop. What's that about?
Right. So there's two different ways to essentially communicate your content and also the person delivering it. Now, you always want to have a human being, or who knows what that's going to be in the future with AI, or
just
a human
Siri's going to deliver the keynotes.
Exactly. A human-like being would probably be good enough these days. But you really want that because that's us as humans. We connect emotionally to that person. You want to see the reaction. You want to see how they get excited. You want to see where they're looking to. We connect that. That's, tens of thousands of years of evolution. So we need to have that component in there. But now, right, you also have a keynote that you're also delivering. You want to get across an important message. So there's the two ways, right? There's the ways that, you and I are showing it. We've elected you to do this because, Tim, our budget, not yet there for a big giant LED wall.
Unfortunately, Tim and Tim Talk does not have an Oscars or an Apple keynote budget. But if Apple would like to have us deliver Tim and Tim Talk from the Apple stage, we'd love to come by.
We'll check our calendars. We'll check our iCalendars.
Our calendars, exactly.
Availability to it. It's too funny. So, yeah, we don't have that. But Apple does. And the Oscars do.
And so they've got that LED wall, right? So saying they're framing the LED wall to put the content behind in the frame instead of doing a picture in picture? They're shooting the content in camera. with a very
Correct.
dramatic shot, which gives the content, the actual slides or motion graphic content, the preferred placement in the camera shot, and the person kind of fills in the corner. Interesting.
It is interesting. And Tim, this was not always an easy task to do. Without going too much into the weeds, I mean, I guess we are a technical show, so this is actually the place to go into the weeds. We'll save that for another episode. But you need to start thinking of pixel pitch. You need to start taking consideration into are you going to be getting blurs? Because shooting the camera against an LED wall is not easy. And I can only imagine how long the Oscars and the video production team for the Oscars took to get that out, to get those kinks out of the system.
Totally. And shout out to my friend Dusty, who was one of the video engineers, the video wall engineers on the Oscars, whose job was to make that work.
You, Tim, your network never ceases to amaze me. That Rolodex that you have, it is just, it's deep. Whether we go here, whether we're going to New York, whether we're going to Europe.
It's something about us Tim. We just network. We make sure we know people all over. It comes in handy once in a while to know who's around.
It really does. And if your friend wants to come in and give a firsthand account of what took place, we'd love to host him and have him, or anybody for that matter that was a part of the production. We would love the insight. We're speculating, Tim. This is what we do best, right?
Right.
We weren't there, sadly.
Right.
Again,
unfortunately, we were not. We were neither backstage nor in the front row at the Oscars. Missed my invitation. Must have gotten lost in the mail. But
yours and mine both. Mr. and Mrs. Oscars, please fix that for next year.
Exactly.
But
and my thank you to the Academy in advance.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we have digressed. So going back to the LED wall, absolutely. Right. But Tim, there's another secret that this setup requires, similar to Apple and similar to the Oscar, is you cannot have the camera too far back. So there is a form, whenever you zoom in with the camera, what you notice is the background becomes condensed and it becomes tighter and smaller. So when you're wide, essentially your background maybe would be this wide. As the camera zooms in, the background becomes tighter and tighter.
So this is because of the lens, like how lenses work, Tim? Is that's
that is
why
correct?
Yeah.
And that is well above my engineering, my lack of engineering degree to explain how and why. I just actually know it exists.
Right.
And so the way that you overcome that, right, is by bringing the camera in. So this is actually fascinating as well, is you'll notice they brought the camera basically all the way to the front of the stage. And this is something that our clients, Tim, now taking this to corporate and traditional AV, they're afraid to put the camera too close because they're worried about the audience. But really, where is your audience? Right? And this technology is amazing. This is just a vertical telescoping, tripod and camera system. I say I'm sure it's $100,000 camera system, not including the camera. That's just the rigging system part of it. But It gives you such an interesting angle and it allows you to execute this vision. Now, if we were to get called and say, mimicking that look, we would find different ways that didn't require as expensive of a budget as that. But this is basically the top tier way to deliver this look because you have to have that camera close. I would say it's probably within 10 feet. I mean, you can see the picture here, Tim.
And we do a lot of events with cameras sort of in the orchestra pit at a theater, but we don't typically raise them up above the line of the stage. And so it's really interesting to think about, in this global stage at the Oscars, they're putting the camera in front of the audience. And so thinking about, with our clients, again, where is your audience? Is your audience primarily in the room or primarily inside that TV camera? And certainly for the Oscars, right, everyone in the room is in entertainment and cinema, so they know that the show is catering to the camera as much as to them. And I think for our clients and for our audience here, think about your production, right? How much of your audience is in the room versus how much is going to be in the remote broadcast, and how are you catering to both audiences, and how are you in some ways reminding the in-person audience that there is also a remote audience and including them in the show. And I think stopping pretending that there's not a remote audience. If we just put the camera front and center, we don't have to pretend there's not a camera there. We say, look, there's a camera here, we have two audiences. You can look down the barrel of the lens, as some of the acceptance speeches did, where they were looking right at the camera. and you can look, cast your eyes across the room, but thinking about reminding your speakers, right? Look at the camera once in a while, break the fourth wall. Remember that, as much as you're looking the audience member in the front row in the eye, look the camera in the eye, because that's your web audience.
Oh, absolutely. And it's just fascinating. They really took a chance. They decided to put the camera right up there. So kudos for the Oscars for really changing and switching gears this year, for doing that and showing that it is possible, right? Like, I feel once a company like Apple or organization like the Oscars does it, it kind of gives justification for the rest of us to do that, and to also have my college professor back in the day change my grade. See, I was ahead of the curve.
Speaking of, lessons learned that, things we've been talking about and that we've been talking about our colleagues about in virtual events, what are some other kind of, lessons that the Oscars have shown us about this kind of hybrid event model, that things that we can take away and that our clients can take away?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Tim, they really got a lot of pushback last year for probably, I think it was around 8, I would say, of the 24 segments got cut from air. They got cut from air. And that's really not in the spirit of what the Oscars are, right? So what they learned, and what was really impressive this year, was they added QR codes. Tim, pardon my pun on this one, they kept the conversation going.
Oh.
Have you heard that one before? Let's keep the conversation going.
Love it. I love it. But we talk about, in the hybrid and virtual event space, that, it's so important to condense your content, right? That audiences have shorter attention spans online, but also in person, frankly, right? Your in-person audiences don't necessarily want to sit in the ballroom or the theater for 8 hours straight, right? They need to get out and they want to network. They're there at your event, not just to see what's on the stage. They're there to mix and mingle. And so how do you make sure that you're delivering the message you need your audience to hear, but also giving them their time of day back? And one of the ways to do that, as we're seeing, is take some of that content out of the program and give it back to the audiences as second screen content or on-demand content, or content that they can access on their own time for the stuff they're interested in. When they want to dive deeper, right, they can watch the episode of Tim and Tim talk about that, or they can scan the QR code and see the background about those nominees.
And it's not necessarily take the content out, right? It's maybe truncate the content, because what they managed to do by putting these 8 segments back into them that they took out last year, they had roughly the same running time. So they got to say more. They had more messaging, but they just didn't go as deep. And then absolutely, right, Tim, you're going to want to really know about the audio and what's going on there. So you're probably scanning the QR code for, those segments. And when it comes to directors of photography, like, I would really want to be interested more in that. And so that's where I get to go deeper. But we all have, a specific niche. And really, that's what the internet is about, is servicing specific niches and showing that these options are there. And maybe that's a good formula for these for these hybrid events and these virtual events that we're doing. Think of it as a showcase,
And we've seen that, Tim, with corporate events where clients want their audience to be able to really get detailed view of the slides or get additional handout content. And they'll put a QR code on the screen in the room as well as on the broadcast that the audience can scan and, download the deck as a PDF or get a handout with additional information, or, obviously polling or things like that, where we're having people who are in the room, they're already on their phones texting their friends or checking email, have them get that out, use that. Both the online audience and your in-person audience can use that second screen to get more content, to dive deep, to get detailed view. And really, it takes advantage of all those devices we have in our pockets, instead of, making everybody feel bad for having it on the table.
Tim, are you saying that basically the Oscars are an interactive show? Where have we heard that before?
Oh, are we having, an interactive,
just like us? That's what we're doing,
right? And I think it's really interesting to think about. I've heard many articles talking about this year's Oscars, and I'm bummed that I missed it, because this year's Oscars, I'm hearing, is was the best in a long time. Really stepped up the game, corrected a lot of the things that people didn't like last year, and so it's really interesting to see that the same things that are working for our clients' events, for corporate events, for conferences, are the same kinds of things that improve engagement, improve audience experience in one of the biggest television productions of the year.
Absolutely. Like, take a chance. You can be rewarded for taking a chance. It doesn't have to be drastic. Like, I don't think anything was extreme, but they took a chance and they're getting good feedback from that. And hey, if it wasn't perfect, some of these things can be tightened up and moved around, but you now have a stepping stone of where to go and where to correct it. Which kind of leads us to the next point that we have, Tim, and my final point of what really the Oscars did differently. So the Oscars for the longest time always sort of saw themselves, no disrespect here, but they were the organization on the top of the ivory mountain, right? You would aspire and you would come to them. They did not need to do anything to be able to grow their content and grow their audience. As we've been seeing with the ratings, unfortunately, have been going down and down. They are now, how do we say this? They're proactively trying to fix that. And one of the ways that they're trying to do that is near real-time clips of their broadcast. So, this means, going to, I think it was TikTok was one of the platforms, Tim, and Facebook was another one that they basically, as soon as it ended, they put it on there. And this is actually a strong corporate strategy as well. So one of our companies, Google, that we've worked with for many years, shout out to them. They were instrumental. They were one of the first companies that we as Argus, we did the same strategy for them, like back in 2015, 2016. They wanted just clips of the keynote. They wanted clips of these talks, and they had an editor on site. And Tim, here's the secret. It's not hard. With everything being digital, it's not a big lift to ask. It's not a 48-hour to 72-hour turnaround.
And there are solutions that would let you clip those in real time. So as soon as that, not just the program ends, but as soon as the segment ends, right, you can clip that segment of your CEO's keynote or a particular acceptance speech and turn that around on Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram Reels before the program is even finished airing. And I saw that with the Oscars, right? I wasn't watching the Oscars, but cool. I was at an unrelated, party. And I was getting messages, right, or notifications on my phone on social media, seeing clips on Instagram and Twitter of acceptance speeches that had just aired, they had just finished, and I think that's a lesson that we can say, to our audiences too, is even if you have an internal event, right, even if it's not action-based content, it's not content that you want to publish on public social media, maybe you have an internal marketing or sales kickoff event or a training event, but your CEO or CFO is speaking. What if you took the take it home message of that keynote and immediately clip it and posted it to the Slack channel? So, you have audiences in person who are about to go to break, and the second the session ends, they get a notification on Slack. Here's that recap of what we were talking about, the message we were trying to take. Or your virtual audience, right, who's watching at home, right, immediately gets to see that, that clip of that take-home message. So, when they get up to get a cup of coffee or mingle in the branch office or however you're structuring your event, they've already got that, messaging. This is the moment that solidifies the point. And so that's a great idea, Tim. It's like, it doesn't have to be just to YouTube and Twitter and external tools. You could use this internally as well. Totally. I like that. I really like that. And one of the other things and actually, I used to offer this to clients, and pretty much none of them took me up on it. So I actually just stopped offering it. But I would offer clipping of videos of their keynote and get it out to Twitter, like while the CEO is still on stage. And, I think the assumption is they're thinking everybody that's watching is already watching, and why post it there? But they just don't. I feel like so many clients don't realize that the power of, this is assuming it's a public facing event, is the power of putting live now, our CEO just delivered this message, or live now, and then you post a link. Now you're driving people to your content and to your program. It's a giant ecosystem. There's no such thing as just, one platform does it all, four wall, lock the doors, unless it's secretive, unless you're trying to make, even if you're trying to make money from it, actually, then this content, this strategy we're talking about would work. But really embrace, your biggest audiences. I wouldn't say blast it out everywhere, but really know where your audience is and blast it to that ecosystem. And
while it's happening.
Totally. And this is something, not necessarily while it's happening, but that we're doing with our program is, taking your content, clipping it into shorter clips, and then using that over the course of the year, right? So you have an event that's once a year or every quarter, but if you can take that content and make it trickle out during the rest of the year, you're getting value out of that event that you had one time in person. You're getting continual value and brand awareness out of that keynote event out of that CEO speaker or that guest speaker that you paid a lot of money for, right? How are you continuing to get value and brand recognition for that content? And certainly, if it's public and you have permission from the speaker to share it, being able to use that content throughout the year, recycle it, and have it drive content or drive recognition of your next event, right? Think about how close, as you get closer to, your this year's event, how showing video highlights from last year's event could help drive ticket sales, right? So those are all ways that, and we're using, social clips to reach audiences that maybe aren't watching the whole podcast or aren't watching, the whole video on YouTube, and getting, just that pithy message. I think that works in the event ecosystem, just like it works for us and it works for the Oscars.
We're not just saying this, Tim. I mean, we're doing what we're preaching, and we're giving away what we're doing in our strategy to grow our channel, to give away tools to event producers, to technical directors, regardless of what side you are on the event, right? These are just important messages to be had. And this is exactly what we're doing. And proof's in the pudding. This is what Apple's doing. And now this is what the Oscars are doing. And, with that, to summarize this point, did you have one more thing to say, Tim?
No, we're good. Go ahead.
Cool. Is that, people, it's no longer the Oscar shows that your mom and dad used to watch, Tim, or my mom and dad, right? You don't have to sit there and watch the whole thing to be part of the conversation. So, and I think acknowledging that, meet your audience where they are, not where you want them to be. That's a big difference, where they are, and doing it in near real time really embraces the future that we're going towards. Case in point, the Oscars of 2023.
Totally. Any other highlights from the Oscars, Tim?
Well, Tim, I did not realize this, but apparently if you get low on crew members, you can turn your talent into audio guys. This is a fun clip. Look at this.
That's so funny. That's so funny. I always love it when we get
a shout out,
particularly, for particularly recognizable folks, to step into tech roles, and we get to see them playing these behind the scenes roles. I think it's always fun to see ourselves reflected on stage as much as backstage.
It was definitely fun. And I really like the inside joke that Jimmy Kimmel said at that. And he was like, "Can I please have quiet? I need 30 seconds of room tone." And I mean, for those that don't know what room tone is, essentially you're creating a baseline of audio that you're then going to put into your edits when you're doing camera cuts, because audio can be jumpy if you don't have the sound of the room. And believe it or not, every room sounds different. I don't want to go too much into the details here. That's for a whole other show.
Yeah.
But Tim, I will say 30 seconds, I usually record a minute. I'm just saying, Jimmy, maybe you should watch a little. Maybe he should watch some of our show.
Well,
should be
I'm sure that's a great joke, and I love that. It's the crowd of the Oscars, right? Obviously, all gets it because they're all on set, and I think it's fun to have.
They're all industry players
to see the behind the scenes reflected, on the show. It's always really fun. So, Tim, go ahead.
I mean, speaking of, I'm sorry to interrupt you, because that's apparently my specialty on this show, interrupting Tim. But, sharing the clips, getting those out there, would love it for the audience to find us. And I mean, where can they find us, Tim? Are these links below?
Tim, yeah, we got some social links below. We got a bunch of different social presences. We're, working on keeping active on all of them. And you can reach us by email if you have questions, if you have, comments, if you have fan mail, hopefully not too much hate mail. But you can reach us at Tims, TIMS, at timandtimtalk.com. And certainly, if you have questions, if you'd like to join us in the program, if Dusty wants to come on and talk about the LED wall of the Oscars, Dusty, or any of you want to talk about programs or projects you've been a part of, reach out to us, and either social media, the comments on YouTube, or
comments
are
email great. Address. We really like them, and with that, if you feel like you would like some of our expertise on potentially one of your productions, and getting execution with these ideas, it would be a pleasure, and it would be a lot of fun to work together,
with you and
collaborate.
Well, Tim, with that, can we get this right this time?
Tim, we're gonna nail this, and I'm Tim. And we
talked.
Nailed it.